Kimberly, a lot of people might not be familiar with the name Medtronic, but they might be a lot closer to it than they think. They might be walking around with it on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
Explain what Medtronic is.
So Medtronic is a large global healthcare technology company that crosses different businesses from cardiovascular, neuro, and surgery. But we're here today to talk about our structural heart business, which makes TAVR devices.
And we say TAVR devices. Okay, so my dad in 1980 had a quadruple bypass. They cracked his chest, and the recovery was pretty tough, right?
Oh, yeah.
But he lived in, another 17 years and passed away at 97. My mother at 93 had to have a heart procedure. They went through the groin, and she was awake and talked throughout the entire thing. Mm-hmm. So that's that TAVR procedure. So part of it is being able to do these procedures and a lot less trauma on the body.
Absolutely, to give them minimally invasive options, shorter turnaround times in the hospital, shorter stays, and getting them home back to care quickly. Yeah.
All right, Selena, one of the things that we'd love to do is for people to never need these procedures, but that comes through education, because a lot of what happens with heart disease is what we do to ourselves. And so education is so important. If you ask most women, what disease are you afraid of? A lot of them will say breast cancer.
Absolutely.
And rightfully so, got to be concerned, right? However, tell us the facts about heart disease.
Well, we know that heart disease is the #1 killer of women and men. However, to your point, most women think that their #1 killer is breast cancer. And so we need to raise awareness about the risks around heart disease. We need to make sure that everyone understands that there's a lot they can do to prevent it. And it's everything that we're going to be doing today, which we're really excited about too.
Which is why you have this program, WomenHeart.
Absolutely. Our work is really to help women be educated, get the information that they need, have the awareness that they need to make good decisions about their health.
When I got diagnosed with heart disease, I had to find a support group here in Houston, and now I am one of the co-coordinators of the support group here at the Texas Heart Institute, Baylor Center.
And then we also advocate, we take Women Heart Champions to the Hill, talking to their representatives about policy changes that can be made to improve care for women with heart disease.
Yeah, because there's one thing for people to be educated, know that what you can control or try to control in your own hands, but the other issue there is that there are gaps in care and treatment.
Yes, and those gaps exist between men and women, between white communities and black communities and other communities of color. So our job is really in those gaps to make sure that folks who are not getting the access that they need and they deserve to better care and better treatments like we've just been talking about is improved.
All right, let's talk about Letter to My Mother. That's what I have right here, and you all have in front of you as well.
I want every time you dedicate time for movement to be a protest to any sickness that comes for the freedom of your health. This is my love letter to you of the legacy of wealth. Loves, your only daughter, Rochelle.
So the Letter to My Mother campaign is an initiative that Medtronic started in partnership with WomenHeart last year to get women to start having conversations about their heart health, having conversations with their mothers, their sisters, their close loved ones, and so that they can prioritize recognizing their symptoms, because our symptoms are oftentimes, underdiagnosed or underrepresented, and we don't necessarily know what they are.
What happens is with all those symptoms, we can excuse them for other things, right? All right, let's go through some of the signs and symptoms that should make you stop and take pause and probably go get checked.
So I think that oftentimes fatigue is one of those symptoms that a lot of women will often overlook.
That's every woman.
They'll think that they're caring for their families, their children, their parents, and they
not
think
just any fatigue, right? That fatigue that is like nothing you've ever felt before.
Yeah.
You're so tired that this feels foreign, but you just think, oh, this is just a little extra.
And that's a great point, is that when your symptoms seem to be exaggerated. Now, the natural self still likes to excuse things because we don't want to think something is wrong. But you mentioned the fatigue. There's another one that so many people are familiar with, and that is, of course, the chest pain, but don't always rely on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Sometimes it can be dizziness, headaches, oftentimes.
Yeah, nausea. Shortness of breath is an important one.
Also, risk factors. We find comfort in dismissing things by saying, oh, it doesn't run in my family. And I remember there was a report by the CDC years ago, and they said more people are likely to die from family recipes than they are DNA. So what they're saying is that DNA plays an important role. Obviously, if heart disease is very prevalent in your family, you got to look at the reasons why. But it's not the only reason, so don't rely on that as keeping you safe.
Statistically, 80% of heart disease is preventable. That means 80% of your risk is in your hands. That other 20% 90% is our DNA, our genetics, and also sort of our environment.
Yeah, and diseases like diabetes, which is one of the #1 reasons for heart disease. But some other risk factors to look at. If you have these risk factors, for you to keep on top of your heart health would be what?
If you are dealing with obesity, that's a big one.
Yes.
That's a risk factor that you need to pay attention to. If you have diabetes, as you've already mentioned, that's a big risk factor for heart disease. Perimenopausal or menopausal, that hormonal transition is critical to be talking to your doctor about your heart health, because as we lose estrogen, we lose the elasticity and the protectiveness of estrogen in our cardiovascular system. So yeah, lots for women specifically to think about.
Sometimes people are so afraid of the treatment even when they know they have the problem. Don't be afraid of the treatment. Technology has come a long way, even since my mom had her procedure a few years ago.
Absolutely. Technology is advancing every day, and all of our researchers and scientists at Medtronic are looking for ways to innovate and develop our TAVR devices so that we're getting patients to care quicker and getting them back home.
We want to be as healthy as possible for surgery. The longer you wait, the weaker you are.
Yeah.
The weaker you are, the harder it is to recover from surgery.
That's a great point.
My mantra is always, the healthier, the better, when you know, in fact, you're going to need a surgery.
Yeah, and looking at risk factors or looking at symptoms, don't rely on that. Get a checkup. To your point, earlier you catch them, the better the outcomes there. All right, the Women Heart Initiative Treat Me Right education program. You're doing events like this to touch the community, and hopefully there's that ripple effect if they go and share things through, like a letter to my mother. It has a kind of butterfly effect.
Treat me right, it says it all, right? We want women to know that they deserve to be treated right. There are guidelines that doctors need to follow that are about making sure that women get to diagnostics sooner, they get treatment sooner, and that their care is managed well. But that starts with that initial diagnosis, and so we are really advocating for women to advocate for themselves within that doctor's appointment.
Yeah, and if you feel like something's wrong, don't hold back. Go in and get it checked.
I made 10 years of having my heart transplant, and so of course I have the pacemaker scar as well, and then I have the heart transplant scar. So I'm just a survivor of many things and still thriving in life because someone was able to reach out to me and get me started with WomenH Heart and understand that you're not alone on this journey. I have to be able to give that back to other women because now it has become my passion to be able to motivate, uplift, and encourage women that deal with heart disease. And I always say there is life after heart disease.
For more information, you can visit alettertomymother.com and womenheart.org to learn more. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you so much.
I heart you. Again, the Letter to My Mother campaign is helping women recognize the signs, understand their risk, and take action early. To learn more, visit alettertomymother.com. You can also find support and resources at womenheart.org. And remember, it's the #1 killer. Don't rely on symptoms to tell you something is wrong, especially if you have risk factors. Get your heart checked.